When the FBI showed up at Don Miller's home in rural Indiana in 2014, it was a shock for people who knew him.
He was very beloved. He was very charismatic.
Former local reporter Liz Dykes interviewed the 91-year-old former engineer about his time in World War II, his missionary work in Haiti, and most of all, his huge collection of artifacts from around the world.
The entire house is a museum. There are things everywhere. It was just mind-blowing.
Miller even gave tours of his collection. So when the FBI came calling, she says,
I wanted to know what they were looking for. There had to have been something.
There was something the FBI hasn't talked about until now.
So large. When I first went into his house and saw the size of the collection, it was unlike anything we'd ever seen.
Tim Carpenter heads the FBI's art crime unit.
Unlike anything you'd ever seen.
Not only me, but I don't think anyone even on the art crime team.
FBI photos never before shown publicly give a glimpse of the collection. Some 42,000 items, including pre-Columbian pottery, an Italian mosaic, and items from China, some that Miller labeled Chinese jewelry from 500 BC.
Roughly half of the collection was Native American, and the other half of the collection was from every corner of the globe. This piece, as you can see, it was labeled by Mr. Miller.
The problem, Carpenter says, was that the FBI found a lot of it had been illegally obtained. Miller admitted he'd gone on digging expeditions in foreign countries and around the United States for decades, in violation of antiquities laws.
Did he understand that he had obtained some things illegally?
He did.
So he admitted that?
He did.
Miller eventually agreed to let the FBI seize some 5,000 artifacts so they could be returned to their countries of origin. But Carpenter says all the FBI's careful planning couldn't prepare them for another, more disturbing discovery.
About 2,000 human bones.
2,000?
To the best of our knowledge right now, those 2,000 bones represent about 500 human beings.
Nearly all of those human remains, he says, were also dug up from ancient Native American burial sites similar to these.
Okay, that sounds like a staggering number.
It's very staggering.
Why would anybody have that many human bones?
I don't know. I truly don't know.
Native American burial sites dating back thousands of years have been a source of fascination for archaeologists for decades.
Meticulous care must be exercised.
This old government film showed the excavation of an ancient Native American village in Alabama. Over time, many other sites have been looted by people seeking artifacts and even skeletons.
This comes down to a basic human right.
Holly Cusack McVeigh is a professor of anthropology brought in by the FBI on the Miller case.
We have to think about the context of who has been the target of grave robbing for centuries, whose ancestors have been collected for hobby. And this comes down to racism. They aren't digging white graves.
Experts determined the remains found at Miller's residence likely came from Native American tribes, including the Arikara. In North Dakota, tribal official Pete Coffey is working with the FBI to bring them home.
All too often here, we have been treated as curiosities rather than a people here. It could very well be my own great-great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother, that had been, I characterize it as being ripped out of the earth,
Miller died in 2015. We wanted to know what his widow thought about all of this.
Hi. Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
So we went to Miller's home, where a Chinese terracotta warrior figure stood guard outside.
I can't comment on any situation at this time.
But Carpenter believes in his later years, Miller understood the ramifications of what he did.
I think he felt compelled to try to do the right thing and return these home.
Returning those Native American ancestors home, which is what Carpenter says is the FBI's most important mission now.
You have to treat these people with dignity. These are human beings and people. It matters. It has meaning to people today. It has meaning to our children and their children.
CBS News correspondent Anna Werner joins us now on set. She's been working on this story for months. Anna, what a fascinating story. How did FBI agents initially become suspicious that part of his collection was stolen?
So the FBI says it got a tip. Won't say where the tip came from, but basically the tip was that he had artifacts that this person believed had been illegally obtained. And it's likely that that person probably had, been in the house and seen them, because Mr. Miller was open about most of his collection. He had a lot of items there from a lot of different countries, and keep in mind that a lot of the artifacts that they seized, 5,000 artifacts, were, the FBI determined, illegally obtained or possessed, that he dug up in various countries or in the United States. So at that point, they didn't even know that there was a large quantity of human remains. All they knew was that there were artifacts that, and possibly a few remains.
So he was open about some of the artifacts, but not about the human bones, correct? Where did he store those?
So he had, as you probably see in the video, he had this vast collection, kind of like a museum in his basement. And when we say basement, you see the photos, he put up his own lighted display cases. There were tables laid out. It was very organized with this enormous collection. It's not your ordinary basement. But what the FBI says is that the human remains were not on display. And the FBI came there, with a huge operation, which Miller had agreed to let them come and do. It was not a drop down, all of a sudden raid where they startled him. He knew they were coming. And they came prepared with some 80 agents, all these tents. That was to handle museum quality artifacts that in some cases could have been centuries old.
Wow.
So they came prepared for that. That's a huge operation. I mean, think about it. You don't want the FBI to be the one that breaks something, and they don't want to be the one that breaks something that has survived for centuries, right?
Right.
And was fairly well preserved, according to them, in a stable, temperature and humidity environment in his house. Not ideal for a museum, but stable. They get into this house, and that's when they discover at a certain point that there are all of these human remains.
And what is his explanation initially for all of these human bones?
So, we don't know the initial explanation. We don't know what. We do know that he admitted to digging at Native American burial sites. These are ancient sites that are protected in this country for very good reasons. These are the ancestors of today's Native Americans in America, of these tribes. And those are, it's as if somebody were to say, you know what, are you okay with me going and digging up your ancestor 8 generations back? I suspect you're not. Yet why was it okay for a long time in this country for that to happen in Native American communities? And when you talk to Native American leaders, they'll tell you, look, it's basically, it's treating them like they're not people.
Right. Now, Anna, it sounds like he could have faced a variety of criminal charges.
Yeah, he could have.
And why did FBI agents decide not to charge him?
I think it was a judgment call. I mean, he was 91 years old, not that that excuses anybody, but he cooperated with them. When they came in, he gave them a tour, he showed them around, they explained to him, look, here's the thing, we want to seize artifacts. Do you know you shouldn't be in possession? And evidently they said that he knew that he had things or had done things that were illegal, that he admitted that. So he kind of, in a sense, he didn't help himself. If they were going to charge him criminally, that certainly wouldn't have helped himself. But on the other hand, here he was being kind of open about some of the things he did, maybe thinking initially, especially years back, that there was nothing wrong with what he did. I mean, there have been other people who have done this. He's certainly not the only one.
So hopefully there was an evolution in his views. At least at this point, he realized what he did was wrong.
So as you know, he died in 2015, so we can't ask him. And his widow and family members did not respond to our request to talk with them.
Right.
We would have been very interested to hear from their point of view, because I suspect the backstory of his life, they would have told us more about him and his approach to things. But what Tim Carpenter, who's the head of the FBI Art Crimes Unit, who we interviewed in this story, said is that he had a number of conversations with Don Miller. And he believes that initially Miller may not have thought he was doing anything wrong, but that his thinking may have, once the FBI showed up, that he sort of said, yes, actually, Carpenter thought that he did sort of know that some of it was wrong, maybe deep down, and that he wanted to help fix this situation by allowing them to take certain things and these human remains.
So the long process now of returning these human remains to the graves in which they came, and also repatriating all the stolen artifacts, is that still ongoing?
It is going to be ongoing for years, according to them. They have
a warehouse, part of a warehouse, in a secret location in Indianapolis, where thousands of these artifacts and these human remains are stored until they can repatriate them back to either the countries or the tribes for reburial. So there's going to be a very large reburial of the Native American ancestors. In the meantime, they are in the warehouse in a separate section where Native American tribal leaders can come in and do their rites that respect their ancestors and their elders, and conduct the ceremonies that are appropriate to having ancestors in that state and place. And they are going to literally drive them back to South Dakota and bury them in an unidentified spot, which is how the Native Americans handle that.
So have they determined that the bones are from a variety of tribes?
So there are some tribes involved, and it's in terms of determining piece by piece. The only way to do that would be to do DNA analysis, which would be destructive. And in the Native American culture, and probably many others, they don't want to be destructive to what they consider to be their ancestors. Those are their ancestors. So what they were able to determine by doing sort of looking at bone structure was that, yes, these are Native American remains, and a lot of them from a tribe called the Arikara. And, you might have seen in our story where we interviewed a tribal official, Pete Coffey, who's with the Arikara. He's been working with the FBI. And the FBI, normally they don't let you and me and civilians and anybody come on their site while they're doing a seizure like that. It's very highly protected. But one of the measures, I think, of the FBI's cultural sensitivity here is that they, from the beginning, asked Native American leaders to come to the site to help them deal with what they then realized was a situation where they needed to treat these ancestors and human remains very differently than you would an object. So the Native American tribes have been involved the whole way along, and have said that they felt that FBI has been very appropriate in their handling and their cultural sensitivity here.
Fascinating
For the
stuff.
most part. Maybe not everybody agrees, but
for the most part. Well, we hope those bones finally all make it to their final resting place once again. Yeah. Anna Werner, thank you so much. Fascinating story. Great work.
Thank you.